I'm Anthony Guglielmi. I'm the Chief of Communications here at the Secret Service, and I want to welcome all of you. I especially want to welcome our partners at the U.S. Small Business Administration. Today, we're going to talk about a significant recovery of funds that are going to be paid back to American taxpayers. As many of you know, the government's COVID economic relief programs have helped millions of Americans. And quite frankly, they've helped small businesses like shops and restaurants keep their doors open. But unfortunately, like with any goodwill, there's some bad actors that take advantage. We are here to hold them accountable. I'm now going to introduce the Assistant Director of our Office of Investigations, David Smith. Sir.
Thank you, Anthony. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the U.S. Secret Service. On behalf of Director Murray and Deputy Director Paramore, thank you for joining us today. Today, we're announcing the results of a complex financial crimes investigation that illustrates the work of our investigative teams and partners and what they do each day. In just a moment, I'll introduce the Secret Service National Pandemic Fraud Recovery Coordinator, Roy Dotson, from our Jacksonville field office, who'll share a few case-specific details. But first, I think it's important to provide a little context of the agency's integrated mission and the essential role investigators like Roy play in ensuring the mission is accomplished. The Secret Service was created to safeguard the nation's financial infrastructure. Today, we're best known for our role in protecting our nation's dignitaries and significant events. However, financial investigations remain central to the mission of the U.S. Secret Service. As threats to our economy have evolved over time and criminal organizations have grown more sophisticated, so have the methods we use in response to combat these threats. Our investigative acumen is strengthened with every criminal caught and with every organized criminal network dismantled. In early stages of the pandemic, we recognized the potential for criminals to exploit the conditions for illicit gain. In spring of 2020, we and our partners issued guidance to financial institutions and the public advising them of these threats. At that early stage, and as we began focusing our efforts on responding to pandemic-related fraud, our immediate goals were: 1, disrupting and deterring criminal activity that could hinder our response to the pandemic; 2, helping vulnerable organizations and communities; 3, recovering money stolen from American taxpayers. This last aspect of asset recovery is what brings us here today. Each year, the Secret Service seizes millions of dollars in assets from criminals. As a direct result of the tireless efforts from our multidisciplinary investigative teams, led by investigators such as Roy, we can return seized assets to victims and taxpayers. But it's important to note that we don't do this casework alone, which is why I want to extend my thanks to members of the Central Florida and North Florida Secret Service Cyber Fraud Task Forces for a job well done. Partnerships are central to how the Secret Service conducts investigations. It's in our DNA. Our cyber fraud task forces are a model for how the public and private sector organizations can be effective in combating crime in a more data-driven and interconnected global economy. The partnerships formalized via our cyber fraud task forces and their resulting investigative successes ultimately benefit the American public. Today, the Secret Service leads a global network of over 40 cyber fraud task forces. What you're about to hear is an illustration of the Secret Service's approach to combating financial crime. It is now my pleasure to introduce the Secret Service National Pandemic Fraud Recovery Coordinator, Roy Dotson. Thanks.
Thank you, Assistant Director Smith, and good morning to everyone. Today, we are here to talk about pandemic fraud investigation and the successful recovery of approximately $286 million in stolen U.S. government funds, more specifically, fraudulently obtained Small Business Administration emergency injury disaster loans, or more commonly known as EIDL loans. One of the primary responsibilities of the Secret Service is the safeguarding of the U.S. financial infrastructure and our payment systems, which includes COVID-19 federal funding. In April of 2020, the Secret Service launched a nationwide investigation into pandemic fraud, which included the mobilization of over 150 of our field offices and 40-plus cyber fraud task forces. Additionally, we worked with the Department of Labor of Inspector General, the Small Business Administration Office of Inspector General, and Treasury's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, or FinCEN, to author and distribute advisories and alerts with fraud indicators to over 30,000 financial institutions and money service businesses. Those financial institution and money service businesses utilized those fraud indicators to identify potential fraudulent deposits, initiate internal investigations, and institute voluntary holds on funds. These early alerts have been credited with saving billions in potential losses. One financial institution, Green Dot Bank, utilized the FinCEN alert to identify potential fraudulent accounts and contact the Secret Service for assistance. In a joint investigation with the Small Business Administration Office of Inspector General, the Secret Service identified 15,325 suspect accounts containing approximately $286 million. And those were fraudulently obtained by submissions of fictitious or fraudulent applications for EIDL loans. The initial investigation indicated the majority of the accounts had been established using synthetic identities, stolen personal identifiable information, or the utilization of willing and unwilling money mules. That just further the investigation as it unfolded. We were actually able to show that the idea that there was many synthetic accounts and the use of those, we only received 4 claims out of the 15,325 accounts. The Secret Service and our federal, state, and local partners are working criminal investigations associated to this seizure, which I am not at liberty to talk about today. Modern day conveniences and advances, which we all use, like online banking, third-party payment systems, and cryptocurrencies, have afforded fraudsters the ability to expedite their criminal activity. Cyber criminals are always fine-tuning their tactics, techniques, and procedures to be in the best position to exploit an opportunity such as a pandemic or natural disaster. As the result, the Secret Service's investigative techniques is ever evolving, and we strive to develop strategies and tools that will allow us to better identify and hold accountable these bad actors. The Secret Service's Global Investigative Operations Center and Digital Assets section are just 2 great examples. In closing, I want to reiterate a point Assistant Director Smith made regarding the value of partnerships. Cases of this size and scope take support from a myriad of partners. I would like to thank the Small Business Administration Office of Inspector General, the Small Business Administration, the Department of Justice, specifically the U.S. Attorney's offices in the District of Colorado and the Middle District of Florida, the Pandemic Response Accountability Committee, or the PRAC, and all of our cyber fraud task force members, which include our federal, state, and local partners. Additionally, I cannot say enough about our financial sector partners and their willingness to be proactive and cooperative in these investigations. I would now like to invite Assistant Director Smith, Inspector General Ware, and Special Counsel Hamilton to join me for a special presentation.
On behalf of the U.S. Secret Service, I proudly present this check to the Small Business Administration.
Good morning, everyone. I am Hannibal Mike Ware. I said I had to say the Hannibal today. It's pretty official. The Hannibal Mike Ware. I'm the Inspector General at the Small Business Administration. Just a few short remarks, but it has to be prefaced with everything that Mr. Dodson said relative to partnerships. Partnerships have been critical to the success that we've had on this whole of government approach to pandemic-related fraud. From the very beginning of this, partnerships with the Secret Service has gone a long way in terms of our investigative efforts and has totally magnified the impact of our office. These type of partnerships are critical, resulting in what you see here today. It's also resulted in over $1.4 billion in seizures. It's also resulted in our office having over 400 indictments and close to 300 convictions to date. But our office is a relatively small one, and it was always meant to be a partnership and a whole of government approach, and the Secret Service has been our most critical partner. Thank you for inviting us today. Thank you for putting on this press conference and for recognizing the hard work of the men and women of the Office of Inspector General. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you again, Inspector General, and our partners at the SBA. We'll now take any questions, Special Agent Dawson can answer about the case.
Thank you. I'm Phil Hayes with NBC News. Wondering if you can tell us who do you think is behind this? Can you find anyone who you could track down connected to this and charge them, or is this largely kind of an amorphous person? Could this be someone overseas? How do you find out who's behind this?
Well, the Secret Service, as with any financial crime investigation, is committed to identifying any bad actors we can. That's no different in this case. So we are continuing to work to identify. We anticipate identifying individuals, whether that's a transnational or domestic organized crime group, or it's individuals that have committed fraud.
Okay, so at this point, it's freezing the money, but you're not actually sure who might be connected to each of these accounts at this point.
We do have several ongoing investigations that I can't speak to that we have identified individuals, but the investigation continues and we fully anticipate identifying suspects in the case.
Do you think some of those suspects might be overseas?
It's possible.
Anybody else?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Courtney Bouguet. I'm a reporter for Government Executive. The President recently enacted a law that will extend the statute of limitations for COVID relief programs. I'm wondering if you could talk about how that will affect or help your investigations.
Well, we appreciate that Congress did that. It will help immensely. We're here today to talk about a case where we quickly safeguarded funds that were stolen, but now we're in the investigative mode. We're deep in the investigative mode, but we're 30 months into, pandemic fraud. So now we're getting into the hard investigations, and this is not going to be a quick fix. As we talked about today, 15,325 accounts at one financial institution. This is one case. So you can just think of the potential number of suspects, how many investigations that could come out of those, and with all of our federal, state, and local partners working this and having the same mission, it's going to be a long process. So extending that statute of limitations, and I want to thank the Small Business Administration Office and Inspector General for being at the heart of that and promoting that. That gives us that extra time to continue to identify suspects and to hold them accountable. Yes.
Sarah Fitzpatrick with NBC News. Yep. Can you talk us through the timeline? When did the institution first identify these suspected accounts, and how long has this investigation been ongoing?
So we initially, as I said, we put out the advisories through FinCEN in partnership with SBA OIG, and Green Dot utilized that. So those went out in the summer of 2020. Shortly thereafter, I received a call from Green Dot Bank explaining to me that they had several accounts that they believed to have received fraudulent EIDL loans. And so we began working together, sharing information between us. And then in October of 2020 is when we actually executed a seizure warrant on those accounts. As I said, this case continues today, and we are in the investigative more so than in the seizure process at this time.
Do you think that, because this is one financial institution, that there's one group actor or group of actors behind this?
No, there's many actors, and that's either, again, that's either transnational or domestic organized groups, because, groups that normally might commit other crimes, whether that's business email compromises, ransomwares, even violent and drug crimes, took the opportunity to take advantage of these programs. So it's a myriad of potential suspects that we have.
How organized do you think that this conspiracy was?
Well, I think on some levels, again, some of our transnational and domestic organized groups are pretty organized and know what they're doing. So they target it. Annually, the Secret Service and our federal partners, we work this type of benefit programs. Working SBA loans or unemployment, insurance, fraud cases is nothing new to us. But just because of the sheer size and scope of these pandemic relief programs, the fraudsters, including our organized groups, took full advantage of them. Yes?
You mentioned the Secret Service role and the long history of finding fraud. Put it in context for us in terms of COVID relief fraud. Is this bigger than anything you all have ever found or investigated before?
Well, we've investigated some pretty large cases, international and domestic. I would say this service, and I don't think my federal partners would argue that, it is probably one of the largest financial crime investigations we've ever taken on.
All right, guys, thank you very much. We're going to be sending out a press release momentarily. If you don't have our subscription, you can email the Public Affairs Office and we'll get it to you. Thanks, everybody, for coming.